They spent my $60,000 college savings on my brother's wedding. I worked myself to the bone just to survive. A decade later, I invited them to my luxury penthouse. When Mom claimed she was right, I said, "No, now I'll never need you again." Then I ordered my butler, "Escort them out." "My name's Logan, I'm 28, and I live in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that give me a full view of the city skyline. It's the kind of place that can feel almost too quiet at times. The kind of place you spend your whole life chasing and then somehow actually end up living in." Every evening, when I walk barefoot across the polished floors and watch the city lights reflecting off the glass, my mind drifts back 10 years to the night my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and completely changed the course of my life. Back then, I was 17, and all I cared about was one thing: getting out. I'd been accepted to my dream school, a place with a tuition that made my stomach twist whenever I thought about it. But I wasn't worried. My parents had set up a college fund for me when I was little, and they'd spent years telling me not to stress about money. That fund was supposed to be my lifeline, the reason I kept grinding through late nights at the gas station my senior year, stocking shelves and mopping floors just to have a little spending money for myself. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My dad ran a small contracting business, my mom worked as a nurse, and we lived in a modest house with peeling paint on the porch and a yard my brother and I were constantly nagged to mow. My brother, Ryan, was 3 years older than me and the golden boy of the family, captain of the football team, homecoming king, the kind of guy teachers raved about. He had this effortless charm that made people forgive him for everything, including never doing chores and borrowing my car without asking. The first sign that something was off came 2 months before graduation, when Ryan announced he was engaged. He'd been with this girl, Madison, for less than a year, but they carried themselves like the stars of their own rom-com. I didn't dislike her, but she had a way of filling a room so completely that it felt like she carried her own spotlight. My parents were ecstatic. Mom immediately started flipping through wedding magazines, and Dad began talking venues and guest lists. I was genuinely happy for him. Really, I was. Until the night they called me into the kitchen. They were sitting side by side, the kind of stiff, serious posture they used when delivering bad news. My stomach sank before they even spoke. "Sit down, Logan," Dad said, his voice calm but weighted. I sat, my hands slick with sweat against the chair. "We've been talking about Ryan's wedding," Mom started softly. "It's going to be expensive. Venue, catering, dress, everything. And we've decided to use your college fund to help pay for it." I froze, staring at her. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "You're what?" "It's for the good of the family," Dad said firmly, as though that explained everything. "Your brother deserves a proper start. He's about to run his own household. We can't let him step into marriage with nothing." My mind went in circles. That fund wasn't just money. It was my future, my escape, the thing that had kept me sane through high school. "That's my college fund," I said quietly. "You told me. You promised me. That money was for school." Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Sweetheart, you're smart. Scholarships will come, or you can take out loans. This is about family. You'll understand someday." I wanted to scream, throw something, tell them they were picking Ryan over me again. But I just sat there, numb, while they kept planning flowers, menus, and guest counts. Upstairs that night, I shut my bedroom door and stared at the ceiling for hours. I could hear Ryan laughing with Madison downstairs, the clinking of glasses, my parents' voices in the background. The house felt like it was celebrating while I was being stripped alive. Over the next weeks, I tried reasoning, showing them my acceptance letter, breaking down tuition costs, pleading for reconsideration. Every time, the answer was the same: family comes first. That phrase began to feel like a blade twisting in deeper each time I heard it. By graduation, the fund was completely gone. Used up on the venue, photographer, open bar, everything. I stood at Ryan and Madison's wedding reception, wearing the suit Mom had told me to be grateful for, watching them beam with pride while I silently wondered how I was supposed to pay for textbooks, let alone tuition. That night, with the party roaring and Ryan and Madison twirling under fairy lights, I slipped out early for a walk. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad: "Don't disappear. Family photos soon." I didn't respond. I just sat on the hood of my beat-up car in an empty lot, staring at the stars, thinking about how everything had unraveled so quickly. I felt small, powerless, furious, not just at them, but at myself for believing I'd ever get the same treatment Ryan did. That night, I decided that if they weren't going to invest in my future, I would. The morning after the wedding, I found my parents at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. The house was littered with leftover decorations and half-empty wine bottles. Mom looked up, smiling way too casually. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Wasn't it all beautiful? Don't you think it was worth it?" I didn't answer. The word worth echoed in my head like a cruel joke. Worth the $60,000 that was supposed to be my ticket out. Worth every late night I'd spent dreaming about stepping onto that campus. "I'm glad Ryan had a nice wedding," I said at last, my voice flat enough to make my dad lower his mug and give me that look. "You could at least sound a little happier for your brother," he snapped. "This is a big day for him." I swallowed my anger. There was no point arguing. This battle was already lost. But it didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, the wedding talk never stopped. My parents gushed over the photos, discussed Ryan and Madison's honeymoon plans, even started planning for a future grandchild's nursery. I couldn't sit through a single dinner without feeling suffocated. Meanwhile, I was scrambling to figure out how to pay for college. I applied for every scholarship I could find, most barely covering anything. I picked up extra shifts at the gas station, then added weekend work at a diner downtown. I was constantly exhausted, sometimes falling asleep at the kitchen table while filling out financial aid forms. My parents acted like this was character building. "You'll thank us one day," Mom would say when I complained about sleep. "This teaches responsibility." It didn't feel like responsibility. It felt like punishment. Meanwhile, Ryan seemed to be living the dream. He and Madison moved into a nice apartment a few blocks from downtown, fully furnished thanks to wedding gifts my parents helped fund. Dad even helped Ryan land a cushy office job through a friend, complete with benefits. One night, I came home after a double shift to find Ryan and Madison on the couch, flipping through a honeymoon album, with my parents laughing and pointing at the photos. "Look at this one," Madison said, holding up a picture of them clinking champagne glasses in some tropical paradise. "We were celebrating because Ryan just got promoted." "That's my boy," Dad said, patting him on the back. "See, Logan? This is what happens when you work hard and make smart choices." I froze in the doorway, sweaty and aching from 12 hours of work. The smell of fryer grease clung to me, my hands sore from bussing tables all night. Ryan barely glanced at me before returning to the album. "Yeah," I said quietly, heading upstairs. "Smart choices." I shut my bedroom door and just stood there, chest tight. They didn't even see me anymore. Not really. I was just background noise in their perfect family picture. Things got worse when I told them I'd been accepted to the university, but couldn't afford the housing deposit. I thought maybe they'd offer a little help. But Dad just shook his head. "We've done what we can, Logan. You'll figure it out. You could take out a loan," Mom added as if I hadn't already thought of that. "Plenty of kids do." I nodded, jaw tight and aching. 2 weeks later, I was in a cramped dorm with 3 other guys, working 2 jobs just to scrape by. My parents barely called except to brag about Ryan's milestones. A bonus, a new car, an anniversary trip. Every conversation left me feeling smaller, like I was the family disappointment they tolerated. By sophomore year, I stopped going home for holidays. It wasn't worth it. The forced smiles, the comments about my weight, Ryan casually mentioning all the help Mom and Dad had given him. The final straw came the summer after my second year when they called, asking me to chip in for Ryan and Madison's down payment on a house. "We just thought it would be nice if everyone contributed," Mom said over the phone like it was perfectly reasonable. I stared at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, barely holding back laughter. I was living on instant noodles and dollar store coffee, my bank account in the double digits, and they expected me to help buy my brother a house. "I can't," I said finally. "I don't have anything to give." A long pause, then Dad sighed heavily. "You know, Logan, sometimes you come across as selfish. Family is supposed to support each other." I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. That was the night something inside me snapped. I stopped waiting for them to choose me. I stopped hoping they'd ever see me as worthy. Instead, I started planning. By 21, I no longer expected my parents to show up in any meaningful way. I worked, studied, and built my life in the cracks they'd left behind. My grades were solid. My savings were slowly growing. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I had some control over my future. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just before finals week, and I was closing at the diner. My phone buzzed, Mom. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped outside. "Logan," she said, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "I have some news." I braced myself. "Ryan and Madison are having a baby," she squealed. "We're so excited. You're going to be an uncle." I managed a polite, "Congratulations," even though my stomach twisted. In the background, I could hear my parents chattering, probably planning showers and nursery colors. "That's not all," Mom continued, her tone slipping into casual. "We've decided to help them financially while Madison takes maternity leave. We'll cover some expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, that kind of thing." I leaned against the diner wall, staring at the wet street. "Okay," I said cautiously. "And why are you telling me this?" "Well," she said, hesitating, "to make it work, we've had to dip into some of your savings account." My stomach dropped. "What savings account?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "The one we've been holding for you since you were a kid," Mom said casually, like we were talking about something trivial. "We didn't tell you before because we wanted it to be a surprise when you graduated. There was about $8,000 in there. We've used most of it already, but we left you a little." I could hardly breathe. $8,000. $8,000 that could have covered rent, tuition, the laptop I'd been making do with for 2 semesters. "You took my money?" I said slowly, disbelief heavy in my tone. "It's not like that," Mom said quickly. "This is for the family. Ryan needs it more than you do right now. You're single. You don't have kids. You'll be fine. And we know you'll understand, because you've always been the responsible one." Responsible. The word hit me like a slap across the face. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. For a moment, I just stood there, rain dripping off the diner awning, the neon sign buzzing above, feeling sick and betrayed. When my shift ended, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly for hours, empty streets blurring past while Mom's words replayed endlessly in my mind. Asterisk, we know you'll understand. Asterisk, I didn't understand. Not anymore. The next time I saw them was a month later at a family dinner they insisted I attend. The table was perfect, candles flickering, wine poured, Ryan and Madison there with Madison's baby bump on full display. "We're naming him after Dad," Ryan said proudly as we sat down. "And Mom and Dad are helping us get a bigger place before he's born. Isn't that amazing?" I forced a smile, my jaw aching from holding it in place. At one point, Ryan leaned over quietly. "You know, we really appreciate your contribution. It means a lot." "My contribution?" I asked, voice icy. "Yeah," he said, smirking. "Mom told me you're helping out financially. It's really generous of you." The table went silent. Mom shot me a warning glance, like she could sense the storm coming. I set down my fork carefully, hands steady even though my chest was on fire. "I didn't contribute," I said flatly. "My money was taken without my permission." "Don't be dramatic," Dad said, waving a hand. "We're a family. This is what families do." "No," I said, standing. "This is what you do. Take from me to give to him, over and over again. You've made it very clear who matters and who doesn't." "Logan," Mom started, but I was already grabbing my coat. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car, clothes, books, the handful of photos I hadn't thrown away in anger. As I shut the trunk under the yellow streetlight, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so far above theirs they couldn't touch it, and one day, when they came knocking, I'd be the one deciding whether to open the door. Leaving felt both freeing and terrifying. My car held everything I had: 2 duffel bags, a box of books, a secondhand laptop, a few framed photos I wasn't ready to part with. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't coming back. For the first few weeks, I crashed on a friend's couch, another student from the diner who understood what it meant to scrape by. His apartment was small, drafty, and smelled faintly of mildew, but he didn't ask questions when I arrived at 2 a.m. with bags from my trunk. What I thought would be a few days turned into 2 months, the hardest weeks of my life. I was juggling 3 jobs: the diner, a graveyard shift at a gas station, and temp work unloading trucks. My body ached constantly, my grades slipped, and sometimes I went to bed hungry, stretching every dollar. Instant noodles became my main diet. On the worst days, I watered down soup to make it last. I remember one night in particular. I came home from the warehouse after a 14-hour shift, back screaming in pain, hands raw from boxes. I checked my bank app. $11.42. Rent due in 3 days. My heart sank so low I didn't think it could rise again. That was rock bottom. And yet, sitting on that secondhand mattress, staring at my cracked phone screen, a thought sparked. If my parents had taught me anything, it was this. I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. Not for money, not for security, not for love or approval. I started writing plans late at night, scribbling in a battered notebook, researching scholarships, applying to internships I wasn't qualified for, teaching myself skills online, coding tutorials, finance basics, entrepreneurship blogs, anything that hinted at a way out. Still, the bitterness never left. Every message from my parents reminded me of their favoritism. Group texts about Ryan's milestones, new house, baby shower, promotions. My name only came up in comparison. How I should be more like him, how I could learn from him. One call nearly broke me. Months of silence when Dad rang. Cheerful voice. Hey Logan, you'll never guess. Ryan just bought a new SUV. Top of the line, leather seats, all the bells and whistles. He deserves it after working so hard. You should come see it. I almost laughed. At that moment, I had 2 crumpled singles in my wallet and an empty fridge. I said, I'm busy, Dad, and hung up. That night, I wrote a single line in my notebook. Never depend on their approval. Build your own. That thought became fuel. Every late shift, every sleepless night, I taught myself something new. Every dollar I managed to save added to a fire inside me that refused to die. I didn't tell anyone about my plans. I just worked, methodically and quietly, pushing forward one exhausted step at a time. There were setbacks. I failed a class one semester after dozing off during too many lectures. I lost a warehouse job after pulling an all-nighter at the diner. I got sick once and had to choose between buying antibiotics or paying utilities. But every failure left a scar that reminded me why I couldn't quit. Deep down, I knew that if I stopped moving, gave in even once, I'd prove them right. I'd be the disappointment, the afterthought, the one who never lived up to Ryan. I refused to give them that satisfaction. So I kept grinding, kept learning, kept planning. Even while running on fumes, even through long, lonely nights, I felt something shift inside me. At first it was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet resolve, a voice whispering, asterisk, this won't be your life forever. You will rise. Asterisk, and when I did, they'd regret every time they chose him over me. The change didn't happen overnight. It was slow, almost invisible. But looking back, I can trace the moment the climb began. Junior year, I landed an internship with a small tech startup. I'd applied on a whim at 3 in the morning, half asleep after a night shift, not expecting anything. But the founder, Leo, called me personally. You work 3 jobs and still go to school full-time? He said, almost laughing. If you can handle that, you can handle anything we throw at you. That internship changed everything. It started unpaid, which meant even more nights eating cheap noodles and walking instead of taking the bus. But it gave me something I'd never had before, mentorship. Leo taught me how startups worked, how funding rounds ran, how products were built, how to think like someone building, not just surviving. I threw myself into the work, stayed late, took on projects that weren't mine, asked endless questions. Slowly, I stopped feeling like an exhausted kid stumbling through life and started feeling like someone who could make things happen. By senior year, the startup offered me a paid position. Not much, barely more than the diner, but enough to quit one of my 3 jobs and focus. My grades shot up. Nights were still long, but now they were filled with coding and brainstorming, not just exhaustion. I'll never forget the first time I saw over $1,000 in my bank account. I stared at the number, afraid it might vanish. Small, sure, but proof I was moving forward. When I graduated, I didn't invite my family. I told them I was too busy, which wasn't a lie. I had already accepted a full-time role and moved into a tiny but private apartment. No more couches, no shared fridges, no hearing about Ryan's perfect life at every family dinner. From there, momentum built. The startup took off. We got funding, doubled our team, and suddenly I was in meetings with investors, giving input on decisions that mattered. My salary jumped. I started aggressively paying off student loans. Watching the balance drop like a game I was determined to win. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I began taking care of myself. Cooking real meals, running in the mornings to clear my head, buying clothes that fit instead of the cheapest thrift finds. People noticed. "You look different," one old coworker said when I visited the diner. "Like lighter, happier." I was. I started networking, attending conferences, meeting people who had built companies from scratch. Every handshake, every coffee conversation pulled me further from the scared kid who once cried over $11 in a bank account. By 26, I wasn't just an employee, I was a partner. When the company was acquired, my shares became a payout that made me sit on the floor laughing until I cried. Not generational wealth yet, but enough to do things I'd only dreamed of: invest, travel, pick where I lived without chasing the cheapest option. A few months later, I bought the penthouse. The first night, I left the bedroom empty, laying on the floor staring at the massive windows, the city spread out like a sea of lights. Quiet, almost too quiet, but mine. After that, calls from my parents became more frequent, little check-ins, hints I should visit. At first, I ignored them. Then I replied politely, short answers only. Conversations stayed surface level. I never told them how well I was doing, never gave them more than I wanted. But I could tell they were curious, wanted to know more. Part of me, the kid who remembered sitting in that empty parking lot years ago, wanted them to see what they'd lost. I didn't rush for confrontation. I kept my success quiet at first, enjoying the thought of them thinking I was still struggling while I closed deals from a high-rise, watching my net worth climb. But silence can't last forever. One Sunday morning, I was sipping coffee by the window when my phone buzzed with a group message from Mom. It was a picture of Ryan and Madison standing in front of a freshly renovated house, their so-called dream home. The caption read, "Asterisk, look how far we've come as a family." Asterisk, something about that wording made my jaw tighten. Asterisk, as a family. Asterisk, as if I'd ever been part of any of it. Later that week, Ryan himself called. "Hey, little bro," he said, cheerful as ever. "We're doing a housewarming next month. Mom and Dad said you should be there, make it a family thing. Plus, you can finally meet the kids." There was a pause, like he was waiting for me to thank him for the invite. I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline. For the first time in years, I wanted them to see me. All of me. Not the exhausted college kid they remembered, not the responsible one quietly shouldering everything they dumped on me. I wanted them to meet the man who had built something without them. But I didn't want to just show up. I wanted it to be unforgettable. The timing couldn't have been better. The company I'd helped build was in the middle of a funding round, and I'd just closed a deal that gave me a significant equity boost. My financial advisor nearly fell out of his chair when he saw the numbers. "This is generational wealth territory," he said. "You're in a position to do almost anything: buy property, invest in startups, even retire early if you're smart." Do anything, I thought. That stuck with me. So I started planning. I upgraded my wardrobe, tailored suits, custom shoes, watches that spoke success quietly, without shouting. I learned how to host proper dinners, how to talk about markets and investments with ease that made people listen. I surrounded myself with ambitious people and soaked up everything they had to teach. Then, almost by accident, I got the piece of information that sealed my plan. A casual conversation with Dad, him trying to sound relaxed but fishing for info. After a few minutes of small talk, he mentioned Ryan and Madison were struggling financially despite the new house. "They've been asking for help again," he said. "We're doing what we can, but things are tight. You know how it is." I leaned back, a slow smile spreading across my face. Oh, I knew exactly how it was. That was the moment I decided. The next time they saw me, I wouldn't just tell them I was doing well. I'd show them what real independence looked like, in a way they'd never forget. I started by inviting a few close friends over to the penthouse and walking through my plan. One, a lawyer specializing in corporate contracts, helped me organize investments, trusts, the works. Another, an interior designer, transformed the place so it looked like a magazine spread, minimalist, sharp, modern. When I looked around afterward, I barely recognized it. It didn't feel like an apartment anymore. It felt like a statement. 3 weeks before Ryan's housewarming, I made my move. I called my parents. "Hey," I said casually. "It's been a while. Why don't you come visit next weekend? Bring Ryan and Madison if you want. I'd love to host everyone here for once." A pause on the line, like they didn't know how to respond. "That sounds nice," Mom said finally, warm but tinged with curiosity. We'd love to see where you live. Great, I said, glancing out at the skyline. I'll have everything ready. When I hung up, I exhaled slowly. For years, they'd made me feel small. In 1 week, they were going to see how big I'd become. The morning they arrived, I woke early and made everything perfect. The place gleamed, floors polished, counters spotless, balcony doors wide open to show the view. My lawyer friend had helped me frame press features of the company, hung tastefully along the hallway. On the coffee table, a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket, flanked by crystal flutes. I didn't do it to brag. I did it so they could see the life I had built without them, the life they once decided wasn't worth investing in. When the elevator doors opened and they stepped inside, I saw their faces change instantly. Mom's mouth dropped open, Dad's brow shot up, and Ryan let out a low whistle. Wow, Mom said, somewhere between awe and disbelief. Nice place, little bro, Ryan added, glancing around. Didn't know you were doing this well. I smiled politely, taking their coats. Make yourselves at home, I said, leading them into the living room where the skyline stretched out like a painting behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a long moment, no one spoke, just taking it all in. This must have cost a fortune, Dad said finally, half admiring, half skeptical. It did, I said calmly. But it was worth it. I poured everyone a glass of champagne and gestured for them to sit. Ryan and Madison settled on the couch, my parents on the armchairs, and I sat across from them, relaxed, like a host with all the time in the world. So, I said lightly, how's everyone been? How's the new house? That was all it took. They started talking about mortgage rates, renovations, daycare plans, and I nodded, listening and smiling as they painted the picture of their busy, expensive lives. At one point, Mom turned to me. You must be so happy for your brother. See, helping him first was the right choice after all. Look how well things turned out. The words hung in the air like smoke. I set my glass down slowly. You really think it was the right choice? I asked, my voice calm but deliberate. Taking my college fund? My dad frowned. We've been through this, Aaron. It was for the good of the family. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said, just not in the way you think. They looked at me, confused, as I walked to the window. The city spread below us, glittering in the afternoon light. You took away my safety net, I said, voice steady. You forced me to build everything from scratch. And because of that, I learned how to do it on my own. Every dollar in this place, every piece of furniture, every inch, I earned it without a cent from you. My mom shifted uncomfortably. Aaron, we didn't mean. I turned to face them, calm but sharp. No, you didn't mean it. You meant to prioritize Caleb. You meant to show me I didn't matter as much. And you assumed I'd forgive you just because things worked out. No one spoke. Caleb glanced at Taylor, who stared at the floor. I didn't invite you here for an apology, I continued. I invited you so you could see what you lost when you chose him over me. I don't need you anymore. Not for money, not for approval, not for anything. I built this life myself. I crossed the room and pressed the intercom. James, I said to my butler, who I'd recently hired for events and travel, please show our guests out. A stunned silence filled the room as the words sank in. You're kicking us out? My dad asked, incredulous. No, I said quietly. I'm letting you leave. There's a difference. My mom stood slowly, her face pale. Caleb opened his mouth, then shut it. They filed toward the door, glancing around the penthouse one last time. When the elevator doors closed, I exhaled slowly. The room was silent again, like that first night I moved in, but this time, the silence felt complete, not empty. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a string of texts from Mom. The first defensive. Asterisk, we were just doing what we thought was best for everyone. You didn't have to humiliate us. Asterisk, the second guilt-laced. Asterisk, we only wanted your brother to have a good start. Asterisk, the last, short and bitter. Asterisk, if you want to cut us out, that's your choice. Asterisk, I stared at them for a long moment before setting the phone down. Once, I might have felt sick with guilt, might have apologized just to keep the peace. Now, all I felt was clarity. A few days later, Caleb called. He sounded tired, strained. Look, he said, I don't agree with everything Mom and Dad did, but you didn't have to go nuclear. They're upset. Mom's been crying. You think I don't know what crying feels like? I said quietly. I spent years crying myself to sleep because of their choices. You got the house, the wedding, the start in life I was supposed to have, and they let me suffer for it. Caleb was silent. You're their golden boy, Caleb. Always will be, I said, calm, not angry. But I don't owe them anything anymore. And I don't owe you anything either. He muttered something about me being selfish and hung up. That was the last time we spoke for months. But this silence was different, not lonely, but freeing. My parents stopped sending group updates. No more pictures of Caleb's kids, no more house renovations, no more backhanded comparisons. It was like a door had finally closed between us, and for the first time, I held the handle. Months later, I threw my first formal dinner at the Penthouse, inviting colleagues, mentors, and friends who had stood by me through the hardest years. As we toasted under the glow of the city lights, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a decade. I hadn't just survived what my parents did, I had turned it into fuel that built my life. And as I raised my glass, looking out over the skyline, I spoke the words that had stayed with me since they drained my college fund. To family, I said with a faint smile, sometimes they teach you exactly who you don't want to be. The room laughed softly, glasses clinking, and for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free.